right, welcome to the Legal Giant Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Newsom. Today we'll be talking about U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and U.S.-UK relations, which have grown tensions regarding the withdrawal. And we will also cover Texas abortion law and some of the most recent developments, including a September 3rd temporary restraining order issued by a Texas court allowing Planned Parenthood to have some coverage from pending lawsuits for violation of a right to life law there in Texas. And as always, we will cover some lovely California workers' compensation subjects. Today, most importantly, apportionment. Not only has the commission come out and stated that apportionment still appears to be quite a bit of a mystery, even for some of the most seasoned qualified medical evaluators. We've also seen some recent case law issuances in Tracy Lee versus Exchanging Granite State, as well as Jeffrey Russell versus County of Los Angeles, both cases regards to apportionment. And those are some of our topics here today. Jumping right in, if you haven't been paying attention, the United States has ended a 20-year war with Afghanistan. We first entered into that war under the guise of stopping terrorism, and it appears, unfortunately, that in this matter we have lost that war for a better term. And not in regards to military superiority, of course. America essentially almost undefeated in that realm, but in regards to what the true goal of the United States was to institute a more free ideology in Afghanistan. And I think it was said best by Lord Robertson, who's the Secretary General of NATO, when member forces entered Afghanistan in 2001, and the exit was, and I quote, hasty, crassly handled surrender to the very people that we fought and defeated 20 years ago. And I thought to myself, yeah, that makes sense. That is essentially what happened here. Now, I don't think that's a fair criticism, right? I would point to a book called The Places in Between by Rory Sturtz, a great book written by a former MI6 agent who walked the Holy Trail during the height of all of this, and kind of gave you a really clear look of Afghanistan, and that there's some really distinct subsections of that country where maybe the only commonality is potentially tea and a prayer rug, and that begets a problem with regards to unified governance. So I don't think that's a fair criticism necessarily of the handoff, because I don't know if there was a long-term outcome in Afghanistan that would have appeased the American people as well as the Afghan people. I do harbor concerns that we had an alleged 300,000 military-strong Afghan army trained and armed by the United States, and the stand-down begot more like a stampede of the Taliban, where I think, I don't want to misquote, but I think the Taliban was from their starting point to Kabul after the announced exit, mere days. So after 20 years of occupying a country and those kind of resources, I would have hoped for a better outcome, and that's what I mean by whether or not we won, or whether or not Lord Robertson, as he said, was a handover and surrender to the very people that we supposedly defeated 20 years ago. That's now apparently Boris Johnson has announced that he believes Biden is a doolally. A doolally, I don't know if you're aware of what that term is. That is a British colloquialism for feeble-minded, or sort of, also kind of a stab to an age in regards to feeble-mindedness when you say doolally. And it does definitely appears there's been some tit for tat. The UK Business Insider reported that Biden administration clearly blamed the UK administration for requesting that the gate remain open at the Kabul airport, which was later subject to a bombing. And I'll just simply say that the only thing that seemed to make real sense of the remainder of that article for me was that if there's a rising concern with both Russian and Chinese authority and what that may mean for the future, our closest ally has always been and most likely will always be the United Kingdom. And when you have a person in Boris Johnson's position calling Biden Doolally and Biden simultaneously ignoring phone calls from what is the head political decision maker of our closest military ally, it begets these types of misunderstandings at the exit. And I would also, in my humble non-expert opinion about all this, I would simply say that I believe some more of the military brass on both sides failing to acknowledge, if there is any blame there, failing to acknowledge the authority of the other side's brass and the need to bring them in a cohesive approach to do something like this exit, because the back and forth blaming and who left open the gate and then the refusing of the calls, it doesn't benefit any U.S. citizens. It doesn't benefit any UK citizens, and it definitely doesn't benefit the troops on the ground. Though, unless the concern is that there's a leak on either side of the fence, either in the United States military brass or a leak in the UK brass, it doesn't make sense to me that there's not a one-mindedness mindset to get the men and women of our armed services out there safely, as well as the men and women that have citizenship back in the home country of either America or the United Kingdom, and make sure they have a safe exit back home. And we all saw that between the suicide bombing and some of the very extreme airport exits, that didn't necessarily occur. There was some talk about a Pineapple Express operation where the CIA was capable of getting out mass numbers of allied Afghans as well as American citizens and allied citizens through a local Air Force base, I believe, called Eagle Base or something like that. And so I just want to personally say that, good job to those men and women involved in that operation and getting all those people out. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I think if we saw more kind of that putting to side political alignment, he's, by the way, because Biden's response to Boris Johnson was he's a mini Trump, and I'm not here to comment on the politicalness of either side of them. I think the both of them not realizing what I hear as an essential a mere member of the Republic, as it were, right? A member of the Democratic Republic of America. It just simply sees that these two leaders need to get along. Then I would believe that hopefully somebody in the know, in authority, in proximity to these individuals, let them know, hey, this is what benefits your people. This is what benefits the military. This is what benefits moving forward, because I don't think either party or either side wanted to see the stand down and the handover. I think it's quite awful, and I think the sooner that we start to see this as a global threat, especially since the disbursement of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and other extremist groups has only served to solidify them. There was a Wall Street Journal article that just came out recently as well that said the Syrian people are concerned about the American troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. And it's like, why would that be? Well, if you've been paying attention, the disbursement has actually created a solidification, a more cohesive group. And in fact, there's unique historical proof of this, that for whatever reason, the specifically Islamic oppression has been universally responded to, irrespective of ethnicity and geographic origin, if the story gets out. And that, in a way, can be looked at in a positive thing, because it is a beautiful thing to see human beings come together on an issue and say, hey, this, I see sameness in you. I see oneness, you and I here. And I see so much of it that I'm willing to come forward, and what they would likely see is probably fighting for what is true and right and freedom and goodness, right? And not to say that there hasn't been times that is, but that needs to be addressed now, because what we've seen is that same type of what could be a beautiful thing of humanity coming together and hopefully for a positive mindset to stop these oppressive things. We've now seen sort of this group band together known as ISIS, and it's also a bunch of other progeny of names to ISIL or all to encompass the idea that it's the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria and Islamabad, and all these locations, and it's basically becoming this one army. And unfortunately, along with it comes some very extreme ideology, especially those that pertain to women's rights, their right to be educated, and their right to even access a vehicle or vote or even have any type of life of their own, especially under the most strict and aggressive of the Sharia laws. And then, of course, there's also the concern for both the men and the women that were in any way aligned or seen as empathizers to the United States. They would be of the first to suffer punishment. And, quite simply put, it's not bearable for me to want to really think about that aspect of it and not think that there is some type of response. And the response shouldn't be that we just exit the country after 20 years and kind of hand it over. I think we all need to look at it and say, what can be done about this subgroup that's becoming a cohesive kind of criminal quasi-governmental entity now? If you've seen the most recent news debriefings involving Taliban representatives for the country, and think to ourselves, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to treat them like we do like cartels internationally, like they needed to be addressed internationally and share information and approach that way? Because I don't think the coalition of the willing, if you look at the countries involved and the actual contribution, I don't think, to me, that didn't appear to be true participation on a global scale that now recognizes what is this greater problem. And that hasn't been resolved. What has been resolved is the exit of a 20-year war, and I would like to applaud the administration on that because somebody had to do it. And thank you for bringing our men and women home and ending what, as you can very well see, after 20 years is instituted essentially no new policies that will withstand any type of opposition. And as such, it needed to be done sooner rather than later. So I will commend the Biden administration on that. Coming up, I want to address now the women's rights, since one of the biggest concerns is, what do we do about this oppressive extremist group that's now taken over vast regions of geography in the Middle East, even against what would appear many citizens' desire. And is that a responsibility of the global community? Is there something we can do? I don't know, but what I do know is that one of the biggest concerns that we have here in the United States is the concern for the women specifically in that country due to the ideology that's going to come in. And so I want to address that the Texas court and specifically the judge who put the restraining order to allow Planned Parenthood to continue at least providing the services that they do to the women of Texas, despite some of the very restrictive laws that we have going on there right now. But we have to go to a message break, and right after that we'll talk to you about that case. Hello, my name is Nicholas Newsom. I am the founding member and managing attorney of NHN Law Offices, a trial consulting and representative firm in the San Diego, California area. When I got first started in the legal field, I understood early on that relationships and connections were as important, if not more important, than understanding the law. I immediately began to amass myself a network of connections of individuals that I thought were not only high quality and worthy individuals, but people who were trustworthy and would get the job done when needed. I have amassed a large network of fellow attorneys, doctors, investigators, and even some fellow judges who I've consulted at times to be able to propose the best arguments for my clients to provide maximum success ratios, even when taking cases to trial. As a result, if you or a loved one is in need of any legal assistance, please reach out to us at NHN Law Offices. We're here to help.
Have you been hurt at work? Struggling with a workers' compensation claim? Dealing with a heartless insurance company? If you're not receiving disability payments or satisfactory medical treatment, or you're unhappy with your attorney, you're not alone. Unfortunately, many injured employees face issues with their workers' compensation case. Don't be overwhelmed. You have rights. The Sexton Law Firm helps injured workers navigate through the workers' compensation maze to maximize their monetary recovery and prevent them from being taken advantage of by insurance companies. James F. Sexton is a former lead attorney for an insurance company. He knows how the other side thinks and the hidden inside secrets insurance companies don't want you to know. The Sexton Law Firm has a no-win, no-fee guarantee. This means that if we don't win your case, you don't pay at all. Call today. Let the Sexton Law Firm get you the benefits you deserve. 619-870-1688.
All right, and welcome back to the Legal Giant Show. We left off discussing Texas abortion law, and I was telling you coming up there was a September 3rd ruling, but before we go there, we kind of want to give you a little backdrop here. There's something known as the right to life in Texas, which is really kind of recent, and both me and some of the other attorneys I've discussed this with believe that on a constitutional level, this most likely has already been addressed. This definitely appears to be a blatant right to interfere with a woman's right to choose, and but I'll let you decide, my dear listener. The right to life in Texas looks something like this. If you are able to detect a heartbeat, which you're forced to search for prior to administering any type of medication type abortion, chemical abortion, physical abortion, or otherwise, then you are forced to turn away the patient. Well, that doesn't sound so bad, right? Except for the statistics prove that about 85% to 90% of all abortions are had after the 6-week period, specifically in Texas. Those are the numbers specifically in Texas, despite this type of law coming forward. And the idea is that you can detect a heartbeat at around 6 weeks, and most women don't really understand or identify immediately that they're pregnant that quickly. Even if you think about it this way, from to play devil's advocate here, even if you were suspective of that to happen, most doctors I know, unless it's an emergency and you go to an emergency room, and I could be wrong, but I'm not certain that a birth test is an emergency, then you would have to call up and get an appointment. Well, that appointment is going to take some time, and it's probably not going to be right away. And then by the time you're able to get this appointment to even take this test, you might be within such a time frame that then you have to immediately get into one of these clinics, and depending on this clinic's availability, it might be de facto denied, even if you were able to move as fast as possible. And I would take any listeners out of Texas who intend to attack the right to life law on a constitutional basis. I would venture a guess into that. One of your better arguments logically might be in the statistics and logistics of getting these appointments and how much time it would take even for a reasonable person to discern, such that it's de facto stopped abortions in the state, because that's what the data that I'm reading says. Now to move forward to, what would be, depending on what side you're from, the hero of the story, Judge Maya Guerra Gamble, on September 3rd out of Austin, in response to a Planned Parenthood request, issued a temporary restraining order blocking Planned Parenthood from lawsuits that seek to sue under right to life. And it would only be for clinics of Planned Parenthood, and only in Texas, and only under that new right to life law, under the guise that they were violating that law. But regardless, I would say that was a step in the right direction to what I believe Ruth Bader Ginsburg would have wanted. I'm always reminded of some of her languages and speeches, and they're just very moving. For me, they're at their very basis is somebody who really understood this document I call that I hold in such high regard to my heart and have sworn to uphold and protect is the Constitution of the United States, and what these freedoms really stand for. Somebody to be personally responsible for their own choices. Specifically, I'm reminded of a quote. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, during her confirmation hearing in response to the Honorable Hank Brown, who was a Republican out of Colorado, made some remarks in regards to her opinion on abortionment and her thoughts about a woman's right to choose. And then she actually clarified these remarks later on, and the clarification it resulted in one of the most beautiful quotes that I've actually had the opportunity to read in law. But I'll give it to you here in a moment. But I want you to know a little bit about the case that she had litigated before, because she had thought long and hard about it. And the case was Struck v. Secretary of Defense. It was Susan Struck, who was a captain of the Air Force, who'd become pregnant during the Vietnam War. And she had wanted to actually give birth to her child, but at the time she was being told that if she wanted to leave to give, there would only be two options within the armed forces. She would either have to abort her child, right? Or she would have to leave the services. She would have to leave her post as captain in the Air Force during the war. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, prior to becoming a Supreme Court Justice, litigated that case. And she told the senators in regards to that she first thought long and hard about abortion rights as a lawyer for the American Civil Liberties Union when she took on the Struck v. Secretary of Defense case. And that was on the Supreme Court's calendar during the same term that Roe v. Wade was decided. And in determining this, Ruth Bader Ginsburg essentially said, "Isn't a woman's right to choose that is most important, and that to do otherwise, to have the government in charge of it, would be to treat her as less than a fully grown adult and not responsible for her own decisions." And there was also quite a bit more beautiful language in there about how the differences of gender and how to do so would be basically gender bias. That one of the hallmarks of being a woman is that she can become pregnant, whereas a man cannot. And to analyze the same is that to force a man to have the same decision, which the armed forces did not, was clearly gender bias, and it's not permissible underneath that intermittent scrutiny standard, I don't believe, constitutionally. And that case came down in Ruth Bader Ginsburg's favor, as we all know. And so, in light of all the things that we've discussed here today, especially in light of some of the concerns of women's rights, I applaud the judge standing up to this law that was recently passed in Texas court, because it speaks more truly to those liberties and those freedoms that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as she so much better than I could eloquently stated. All right. Now it looks like I'm getting hit for one more break here, but before we go, I'm going to leave it to you. What would you do in Texas? And I just think about it. It's a large state. Right, it's a large state, and it's rural. It's probably over 100 miles, especially if you're in the center of Texas, over 100 miles to be able to drive to another state to try to accomplish an abortion, if it needed to safely be done. And I'm a Catholic, and I don't really have an opinion on this left or right in the sense that I don't believe that my religious opinions in regards to certain things should affect somebody else's legal right to have access to a safe, healthy, clean medical procedure if it can be done safely and within the bounds of the law. And I'm not certain that the way this law is written, and that's why I'm going to ask you, what would you do if you were the unwittingly pregnant young individual who is now in the middle of this state and can't get an abortion, and absent 110% parental sign-on, and immediately wanting to press this all the way through, you're now forced into some very weird and strange decisions. What would you be capable of getting that bus ticket or that car ride, or safely making the appointments or whatever is necessary? Because I mean, I don't know enough about the process, but my guess is it doesn't happen the very first time. I don't think you can just stop by and have an abortion. I think you have to probably have a preliminary medical appointment, and some other things have to go on. And if those medical appointments aren't even going to be paid for or allowed in the first place in this Texas location, because they have found a heartbeat within 6 weeks, what would you do? What is the right answer here? I don't know, but we'll be back after these messages.
Trusts aren't just for the super rich. It can take a year to probate a modest homeowner's estate, eating 6 to 8% of the estate's value. A trust can speed things up and preserve assets. The Sexton Law Firm.
Outside of making the choice that you want more out of life, nothing's more important than education. The vast majority of what we provide here at Alpha Research is education, and it's my personal belief that education will take you from where you are to where you want to be. I can take this proven program of success and apply it to your situation and help you achieve the same results. But don't take it from me. Take it from our most recent Alpha Research success story.
Hi, my name is Randy Rivas, and I'm a California licensed attorney. I would just like to say that I'm very grateful that I got to know and become friends with Nicholas Newsom. I remember Nick from law school. In almost every class he would have the highest grade. And it wasn't only because he was a very talented and wise individual, but it's because he worked so damn hard. So it was a great mixture. What I want to say, how he helped me recently, was that I was in a really bad financial place. Even as an attorney, I was having trouble paying my bills. And I had a talk with Nick Newsom for about 20 minutes. And he just really inspired me and gave me the confidence, to the point where that same day I went to go talk to my boss, and I got a raise instantly of 79% of my salary. I'm very grateful to him, and I would recommend any advice, any program that he would recommend for you.
All right, and welcome back to the Legal Giant Show. We finished discussing some of the law out of Texas, and now we must cover our beloved California workers' compensation subject for my local listeners here. The WCAB stakeholders came out, and there was an article in the Work Comp Central on August 23rd, 2021, simply stating, apportionment still widely misunderstood despite updates of regulations, lengthy case history, and many experts say they're not certain when this will be fixed. Now, one of the commenters very aptly pointed out that there was a recent change in apportionment law in SB 899. I don't say recent, is been some years now, quite a few years, well almost coming up on a decade. But that change in the law included 4663, which merely requires causation of the apportionment, not simply pre-existing disability, which was under Labor Code 4750. Now, some of the more recent cases out of the Workers' Compensation Appeals Board in 2021 are this Tracy Lee versus X Changing Granite State Insurance Company. Now, again, keep in mind, these are not significant panel decisions. These are not binding, but they are good guidance because these are recent cases that the WCAB has looked at and said, hey, this is how we analyze these cases, and this is how we think apportionment should be ferreted out. So there's some good information in there. In Tracy Lee versus Exchanging, there was 84% orthopedic and psychiatric disability, and there was also note that there was a prior award of 84% for disability in this case for Ms. Tracy Lee in a prior workers' compensation claim. However, in this case, the WCAB said there's no overlap, and also specifically pointed out that even if there is some overlap, because the two permanent disability years are completely apart, one's under the 1997 rating schedule and the other's underneath the 2005 PDRs, that the WCAB found the WCAJ was proper in using the apportionment as provided by the medical legal physicians in that case, rather than simply subtracting the awards. It further pointed out that if they did subtract the award of 84% from 84%, it would result in a 0% stipulated value, and the court kind of pointed that out, and they didn't say that's why they came to that decision, But when I look at things like that and I see that kind of fact, and having done some very aggressive defense litigation before and advising clients the same, that yes, when you aggressively try to draw a line to make some very clear case law on what you think is a position in your client's case, you may find out that if you're telling a WCJ within the WCAB, especially in light of Labor Code 3202, that the law is to be liberally construed to extend benefits to the applicant, then you would have to understand that an 84 minus 84 to 0% rating without more facts in this case isn't really going to line up. Now, the WCAB also issued another case on apportionment, Jeffrey Russell versus County of Los Angeles, and that court came down differently. Jeffrey Russell was a fire chief too, and I thought that was unique. I've always seen, especially with the presumption laws and how they work in regards to apportionment, it's not that easy to get apportionment as a defense attorney against a peace officer that has some of these legal benefits within the labor code going towards them, because they have those presumptions within the code that it was industrial, and it makes it a much tougher hurdle that's already again in light of 3202 and everything else, and then now you have this presumption. It's just it's a tough standard to make. So kudos to the defense attorney in this one, fighting a good fight and winning out, it seems like. But it found that the WCJ applying apportionment by subtracting the prior award was correct, where they found that the injuries were to the, quote, same region of the body as detailed and defined in Labor Code 4664 sub C sub 1 sub capital G. And they also analyzed in that case the 100% cap on any one body part, and found that because Jeffrey Russell had had a prior 34% award to this same body part region, that they could only have a total of 66% left in any one body part. And then because there was no overlap in all the body parts, it wasn't entitled across the board, but for the body parts for the same region of the body, they allowed apportionment. In light of these two cases in 2021, and the most recent stakeholders saying that doctors don't understand apportionment, and having had some issues with apportionment myself in litigation, in seeing that doctors will render an opinion and they simply state because there was no evidence of prior disability, there's no evidence that there's apportionment in this case, and that's just not the case anymore. But I mean, there was a hallmark case in workers' comp known as Rice, which allowed that not only can you have and this has been treated kind of negatively after the fact, to the extent that it's looked at as a specific targeting of a subsection of a group. It's not allowed. But the idea that somebody could have a pre-existing non-industrial condition and not necessarily have a disability, but this condition causing the vast majority of the disability, and therefore being able to apportion that to non-industrial causes and therefore saving defendants money, makes sense, because from a due process standpoint, you should not be asking anybody to pay more than their fair share, even after notice and right to be heard, because it's a form of takings, in my humble opinion, especially once the government's involved. Well, there you have it. We've covered a bunch of things here. The U.S. withdrawal, kudos to the United States ending that 20-year war. Maybe not the best way about it. Women's rights in Texas, man, crazy battleground. I know I went to school with some extremely strong women, and I know some attorneys in Texas that are actually trying to do something about that. So if you want me to get you in touch with them, feel free to reach out. And to all my workers' compounds, let me know. Drop your comments in the box below. Shoot me an email. Give me a phone call. I'm sure you got my phone number. Let me know your thoughts on apportionment and anything that you have going on to it. I'm Nicholas Newsom. I'm your host, and this was The Legal Giants Show. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Undercover lovers infecting the industry, and even undercover others that give you the ministry. I know that I ain't perfect. I know I'm a synergy, but I'm hoping if you listening, you feeling my synergy. Amen. So many wish the worst on me, wish the worst on me, till I bring that major pain.